Hey there, Algebra 2 students. Welcome back to Miss McGuire's classroom. I'm Miss McGuire, and today we are going to be doing Unit 3, Lesson 4. Don't forget to put your first and last name, the period, and the date in the upper right-hand corner. Our topic today is factor polynomials when a is not equal to 1. Your objective for today is I will factor polynomials with a leading coefficient that is not 1. So in our Unit 3, Lesson 3, we focused on learning how to factor by grouping. Today, we're going to continue to do that, except this time, a, or our leading coefficient, is going to be some number other than 1. So the good news is, though, that the steps are the same. So you're not learning new steps. It's just a little trickier, a little more difficult today. So remember, when you're looking at a polynomial in standard form, the standard form of a polynomial is always ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is the coefficient of the x squared term, b is the coefficient of x, and c is your constant. So for part A, we have 4x squared minus 4x minus 3. Our directions are to factor the trinomial by grouping. So here I've laid out all 7 steps to make it super duper easy for us to follow. So let's jump right in. So the first thing we need to do is multiply a times c. Well, to do that, we should identify a, b, and c. So in this case, a is 4, b is -4, and c is -3. Well, when we're multiplying a and c, we don't really need to worry about the negative. We worry about that in the next step. So for part A, to make our factor tree, or for step 1, sorry, to make the factor tree, we just use the positive coefficients. So 4 times 3 would be 12. So we're going to make a factor tree for 12. Well, the factors of 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. So now in step 2, we need to find factors of a times c that add or subtract to make b. So factors of 12 that add or subtract to give us -4. Well, I can't add or subtract 1 and 12 to get 4. I can definitely add or subtract 2 and 6 to get 4. And then I can't do it with 3 and 4. So we're going to use 2 and 6. Step 3, rewrite the bx term using the factors of ac. So we're going to rewrite -4x using the factors of 2 and 6. So to do this, we want one term to be 2x and we want the other term to be 6x. Well, if I take a positive 2x and I subtract 6x, I would get -4x. Then I'm going to rewrite the polynomial using the new terms for bx. So we're going to write 4x squared, and we're going to replace the -4x with positive 2x and -6x, and then we keep our -3 constant. Then we group our pairs with parentheses and put a plus sign in between. So we're going to put 4x squared plus 2x in parentheses, a plus sign, and then -6x minus 3. So I need you to always remember to put your plus sign in between these two grouping symbols because we don't want to multiply them. We want to add them in this step. Now factor out what each pair has in common. So 4x squared and 2x have a 2x in common. So 2x times 2x would be 4x squared. 2x times a positive 1 would give me 2x back. Then -6x and -3. So anytime the leading term is a negative, you always want to factor out that negative. So we're going to factor out a negative, and then 6 and 3 have a 3 in common. So we're going to factor out a -3. Well, -3 times positive 2x would give me -6x, and then -3 times 1 would give me -3 back. Well, hey, check it out. Our parentheses match. So remember, the last step is you set up your 2 sets of parentheses, so our 2 factors. This time you're multiplying them. So this time you just put the parentheses next to each other, like multiplication. You put what's the same in the first parenthesis, so 2x plus 1. What's left goes in the second parenthesis, so 2x minus 3. So our factors are 2x plus 1 times 2x minus 3. And we can multiply that out to check and make sure that our answer is correct. And that is what you would circle. That's your final answer. You have factored 4x squared minus 4x minus 3. All right, let's do number 2 together, and then I'm going to have you do D and E on your own. So 2x squared plus 11x plus 12. Remember, step 1 is to multiply a times c. So in this case, it's 2 times 12. Make a factor tree for that. So make a factor tree for 24. 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. So you find all the numbers that go into 24 to make your factor tree. Now find factors. Step 2 is to find factors of 24 that add or subtract to be 11. Well, we can't do that with 24 and 1. 2 and 12 don't add or subtract to be 11, but 3 and 8 do. So we're going to use 3 and 8. So now we're going to rewrite our 11x term using 3x and 8x. Well, to get 11x, I would need both of these to be positive. 3x plus 8x is 11x. Step 4, rewrite your polynomial using these two terms for the bx term. So 3x plus 8x plus 12. Then step 5, put your grouping symbols. Make sure you have a plus sign in between. Step 6, factor out what each pair has in common. So 2x squared and 3x only have an x in common. X times 2x would be 2x squared, and then x times 3 would get us that 3x. 4x and 12 have a 4 in common. 8x and 12, sorry, have a 4 in common. And then it would be 2x plus 3, because 4 times 2x is 8x, and 4 times 3 is 12. So now we see that our parentheses match. So what matches goes in one factor, 2x plus 3, and then what's left goes in the other, x plus 4. So 2x plus 3 times x plus 4 is the factored form of 2x squared plus 11x plus 12. And we can multiply that out just to double check, but I don't want to take the time to do that today. All right, part D. So why don't you give this a shot? Remember, step 1, multiply a times c, find factors of a times c that add or subtract to give you the 7x. Then rewrite 7x using those factors. Create your 4-term polynomial, put your grouping symbols, factor out what each pair has in common, and then put your factors in. Go ahead and give it a shot. All right, so this one's just a little bit tricky. And I bet you noticed something a little different when you got down to the 6th step. So I multiplied 4 times 3, I got 12. The factors of 12 that add or subtract to be 7 would be 3 and 4. So I rewrote 7x as 3x plus 4x. I wrote 4x squared plus 3x plus 4x plus 3. I put my grouping symbols with a plus sign in between, and then I factored out what they have in common. And this might be where you got a little confused on this one. So 4x and 3x, 4x squared and 3x clearly have an x in common to factor out, which you can see I did here. But 4x plus 3 have nothing in common, it seems. However, technically 4x plus 3 has a GCF of 1. So you factor out the 1, which factoring out the 1 doesn't really change anything. But I just wrote it out in front of the parentheses just so I could see it, and then left 4x plus 3 alone. That way, one of my factors ends up being x plus 1, while the other factor is 4x plus 3, which you can clearly see match in these two sets of parentheses. All right, so 4x plus 3 times x plus 1 should be our final answer. All right, and last but not least, 2x squared minus 7x plus 6. Go ahead and give this one a shot and press pause and press play when you're ready to check your work. So as you can see, I multiplied 2 by 6. I got 12 again, made a factor tree for 12. The factors 3 and 4 would add or subtract to get us that -7 for our B value. I rewrote -7 as -3x minus 4x. So then I rewrote the whole polynomial using -3x and -4x in the middle. Then I put my grouping symbols and check it out. Make sure when you put your grouping symbols that the negative with the -4x is inside those parentheses. Then I factored out what these pairs had in common, their GCF. For 2x squared minus 3x, I factor out an x. For -4x plus 6, remember that first term is a negative, so we always factor out a negative. So -2 came out, and then I have 2x minus 3 left. Now you can see that my parentheses match, so that's one of my factors. What was left, the x minus 2 is my other factor. So x minus 2 times 2x minus 3 should be your final factored form for this polynomial. All right, let's keep going. So now we're going to learn how to factor by grouping when a is less than 1. Which means, actually, you know what that's supposed to say? That's supposed to say a is less than 0. Which means that a is a negative. So check it out. For part A, we have -18x cubed minus 132x squared minus 42x. All right, so as you can see, our leading term is negative. So because of that, we always want to factor out the negative first. So I'm going to factor out a -1. So then I have, if I factor out a -1 from -18x cubed, I'd be left with positive 18x cubed. If I do the same for negative 132x squared, it becomes positive. And then the same for 42x. So after that, I noticed that all of these terms also have an x. So I'm going to factor out that x as well. Then I also noticed that 6 goes into 18, 132, and 42. So I'm going to factor out a 6 as well. So I'm going to have -6x times 3x squared plus, I think 132 divided by 6 is 22. 22x plus 7. Now what we need to do is we need to see if we could factor this even further. So right now as our factors, we have -6, and our other factor is 3x squared plus 22x plus 7. So now we need to see if we can factor 3x squared plus 22x plus 7 by grouping. To do that, we're going to go through our steps. So step 1, multiply a times c. So a is 3 and c is 7. So I'm going to take 3 times 7, which is 21. Make a factor tree for 21. 1 and 21. 2 does not go into 21. I think it's just 1, 21, and 3 and 7. So now we look for the factors of 21, the add or subtract to get us 22. Well, 1 and 21 would get us 22. So I'm going to rewrite 22x using 1 and 22. So this is where you need to watch out. Things get a little tricky here. You got to keep the -6x out in front, and you want to keep this in parentheses because we don't want to forget that that -6x is still a factor. So we're going to have 3x squared. I'm going to rewrite 22x as 1x plus 21x plus 7. And now we're going to factor by grouping like we normally would. So this -6x stays out here. Change these guys to brackets. And then we're going to group 3x squared plus 1x. And then we're going to group 21x plus 7. And we're going to make sure there's a plus sign in between. Now factor out what each of those pairs have in common. So 3x squared and 1x have an x in common. So we're left with 3x plus 1 plus 21x and 7 have a 7 in common. So 3x plus 1. And I know I'm right because x times 3x would be 3x squared, x times 1 would be 1x, 7 times 3x would be 21x, and 7 times 1 would be 7. Okay, so hey, check it out. Our parentheses match, just like we want them to when we factor by grouping. So now we have -6x times, and then we're going to have our two sets of parentheses. 3x plus 1 goes into one, and then what's left goes in the other, which was x plus 7. Well, since we're multiplying, we don't need these brackets anymore. So you can actually write your final answer as negative 6x times 3x plus 1 times x plus 7. You can leave the brackets if you want, but we don't need them anymore. All right, let's keep going. So negative 12x cubed minus 30x squared minus 12x. So before we get very far, factor out the GCF of negative 12x cubed, negative 30x squared, and negative 12x. Go for it. So you should have negative 6x times 2x squared plus 5x plus 2. Now you're going to factor by grouping. So factor 2x squared plus 5x plus 2 by grouping. Remember, take a times c, and then make a factor tree. Rewrite 5x using factors of a times c, that add or subtract to give you that 5x, and then go on from there. So press pause and then press play when you're ready to check your work. As you can see from my work, I got negative 6x times 2x plus 1 times x plus 2. Hopefully your work matches. All right, now negative 5x squared minus 12x plus 32. So 5, 12, and 32 don't have any GCF, so we don't have to factor out a GCF, except the first term is negative. If the first term is ever negative, you always want to factor out that negative one first. So we're going to factor out a negative, and we end up with 5x squared plus 12x minus 32. So negative times 5x squared plus 12x minus 32. Now go ahead and factor by grouping. You're going to multiply 5 times 32, make a factor tree for that number, find factors that add or subtract to give you 12x, rewrite it using 4 terms, and then use your factor by grouping. So press pause and then press play when you're ready to check your work. Give it a shot. All right, so as you can see, I found factors of 5 times 32, which is 160. I found that 8 times 20 would give me 160, and also add or subtract to get me 12x. So I rewrote 12x as 20x minus x minus 8x. Then I put my grouping symbols with a plus sign in between. Then I factor out a 5x from these two terms. I factored out a negative 8 from these two terms, which left me with x plus 4 in both of those parentheses. So the parentheses matched. So my final factors are the negative times x plus 4 times 5x minus 8. So hopefully our answers match. All right, let's do one more. So negative 7x squared plus 8x plus 12. Go ahead and do this entire thing on your own. But here's a hint, your leading term is negative. What do we always do first if our leading term is negative? Go ahead and give it a shot. Press pause and then press play when you're ready to check your work. So as you can see, I multiplied 7 by 12, I got 84. I made a factor tree for 84. 6 and 14 add or subtract to be 8x. I used negative 14x and a positive 6x in the middle here. Then I put my grouping symbols, factored out their GCFs, and I ended up with a negative times x minus 2 times 7x plus 6 as my factored form for this polynomial. Hopefully our answers match. All right, go ahead and do your extra practice. When you're done, submit it to Schoology, and then we will go over it together as there's time. I'll see you guys back in class. Have a good day.